Hey guys, this is Mitch with FinePoint CGI, and today we're going to talk about continuous integration using GitHub and Godot. So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about what continuous integration is. We are going to go ahead and set up our build process, and we're going to build out for Android, Windows, Mac, and Linux. Now, in this first part of this series, we are only going to cover building. In the next part, we're going to go ahead and do unit tests and things like that. But in this first one, we're just going to cover building. So that's what I have in store for you guys today. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first question that we have is, what is CI/CD? And CI is basically continuous integration, and CD is continuous delivery. So basically the idea is that it is going to allow us to push our code to our repo. We're going to compile it, run a small test on it, and then deploy it to production or to our test servers, depending on who you are. Now, to look a little bit more in depth on our stages, the first phase is building. So what that means is it compiles our program on every merge or push. If you fail this phase, then that means that there's a sign that something is majorly wrong with your project. And the nice thing is it does weed out minor problems with your game or with your product. So for instance, if somebody puts out a PR or a pull request or a merge request and it doesn't build, then you know that something's majorly wrong with what they have and they need to fix it. And this will be the phase that we're going to be doing for this video. But we'll run through the other two phases real quick, and then we'll go ahead and get started on this. So the second big phase is automated testing. In this phase, we actually are testing our project with automated tests. So this will require us to build them ourselves using a unit test framework, and this can always indicate if something that simple that worked before just broke. So for instance, if you have a test that says, I'm going to go run this algorithm, it's going to print out 42 and it prints out 43, then we know that there's something wrong with our algorithm. We're going to need to go take a look at it. Or if, for instance, we say, I want my enemy to take 10 points of damage, which should kill the enemy, but it doesn't kill the enemy, then did somebody update the enemy's health status, amount, or damage taking code? So it can really help with cluing you in on issues that your project might have. And the last phase is deploy. And this is where we deploy our project automatically to our servers. And again, we'll be doing this phase later, I'm sure. This is usually done automatically to our dev staging servers and not to production. Generally speaking, you don't want to just throw your stuff into production, especially if it's been a merge. Even if everything's passed, you might not want to do that. So a lot of times what larger companies do is they have a dev or a staging server that they run through their own QA to make sure, or quality assurance, to make sure that the project is up to snuff before it gets shoved out to production. Because we don't want something blowing up in production that our unit tests didn't cover. Because believe me, unit tests don't cover everything. So now that you have an idea of how continuous integration works, let's go ahead and set up our build system. All right, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to talk about what GitHub actions are. So what a GitHub action is it's a thing that happens when you push code to your repo. So in this case, what we're going to be doing is we'll be making a GitHub action that builds our project and deploys it out to our release section right here. And you can see that I've already done some testing on this repo. So you'll see a couple of releases and some artifacts from me using the build process. But if you guys go into your project like this, and then you go over to your actions, and you'll see I have a couple of workflows that have already been ran, but just ignore those. And if we come over here to our new workflow button right here, you will see it says getting started with GitHub Actions. Now, this is really useful because if we were creating a .NET desktop application, or maybe a .NET application, or maybe some deployment options, if we want to deploy out to Kubernetes or something like that, or OpenShift, or if we had some security stuff we wanted to run, or maybe some continuous integration stuff such as, compiling Swift or Node.js stuff. But we really don't have any of that for Godot. Unfortunately, there's not a package that's built specifically for Godot. So instead, what we're going to do is we are going to come up to here where it says set up a workflow yourself. So go ahead and click on set up a workflow for yourself, and you'll see that here is our little workflow. Now, the nice thing is there's some really cool people out there that have made some Godot workflow stuff. They just haven't made a template specifically for Godot. So what we can do is we can come over here to our search marketplace for actions, and we can actually type in Godot, and you will see that there's a bunch of Godot actions. So that's one of the cool things. But I am getting a little ahead of myself. Let's kind of discuss how this file operates. So what you can see is we have a name for our workflow. We have our control for when it runs. So you can see here, whenever a branch push happens to main, or whenever a pull request happens into main, it's going to run this action here, okay? And then if you come down here, you can see this little thing here, which will allow us to dispatch our workflow ourselves. And here, if I go ahead and zoom in a tiny bit so you guys can see, just in case, you can see that there's a section here that says dispatch our workflow, and that actually allows us to dispatch a workflow. If we come down here, you can see all the jobs that are being ran. So basically what's happening is we're saying, when you do this, run these jobs. Simple enough, right? So you can see that it says jobs. This workflow contains a single job called build right here. And it says that the type of runner the job will run on, it runs on Ubuntu. So we're going to be building on a Linux machine. Now, if you want to build out a Macintosh build, you're going to need to use a Macintosh machine. You can't build for Mac without having a Mac machine. So that's something to keep in mind. But in this case, we're going to use Ubuntu because we're going to be building Linux and Windows. Now, if you come down here, you can see the steps. So once it's initialized our little VM, what's the thing that it's going to do? And in this case, it's going to come down here. It's going to check out v3. So it's going to check out our repository. It's going to check out our main repository. And then it's going to go ahead and run a one-line script called hello world. So it's just going to say hello world. And then it's going to run a multi-line script, which basically just says hello world, add other actions to build. And it's going to echo out test and deploy your projects. Now, we don't need these guys for our Godot export. That's what this is for. So what we'll do is we will actually come up here. We'll delete these guys, and then we'll click on Godot Export. And you'll see that this guy actually has already written a little bit of documentation here for us. So you can see it says you need to say uses Firebelly Godot Export v3. So we'll copy that, and we will say dash name colon export game, and then we'll say uses tab uses colon, and then you'll see that they want us to use his add-on right here. It'll say, if I kind of scoot this over, uses Firebelly Godot Export version 3. So we copy that and just go ahead and paste that in. And then we hit enter. And you can see that they have some more examples here. With, so we can type that in, colon. And you can see that he has Godot executable download. And you can see that he has lots of documentation here. Now, you could copy and paste this, but most of this is not necessary. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, what we can do is we can grab Godot executable download URL right here. And we're going to hit space. And this is what our executable URL is going to be. So if we go out to, and if I pull this down for you guys so you guys can see, just like that, if you come over here, you can see that there is a thing called downloadtuxfamily.org/Godot engine. Okay, and if I hit enter, you can see here is how it looks. Now, you can see here, I use Godot 3.4.4. So if I open up my Godot project right here, you can see I use Godot 344 stable mono. So if I go into 344, I go into mono, and you can see that I use Godot 344 stable mono version, and we want to do our Linux headless edition because we are using Linux for our build. So we'll go ahead and grab this HTTPS connection here. We'll go back to our new file. We're going to paste that in / we'll go back here and grab this headless.zip. So it has it. So we'll copy that and paste. Then we'll hit enter. And then now we need to go ahead and create our export template download. So we'll say Godot _export _templates _download URL : and we are going to basically do the exact same location, except for we're going to go ahead and use our export templates, which is right here, this TPZ file. So we'll come in here, we'll copy, and we'll paste that in. All right. And now if you read the documentation here, it says that we need to specify a relative path to our project.godot. So we'll go ahead and grab that. So tab, 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 tab. And in our case, it's right at the root of our project. So we'll say /. And we can look at our other things here. We can see if exports should be archived. You can see it says optional, so that's not necessary. You can see this is optional. You can see that this is optional, this one's optional, this one's optional. And they have all sorts of really cool options here. So you can see, like, if you want to create a release, if you want to generate your release notes. And it's really hard to see with such a small little screen. So if we kind of zoom this out a tiny bit, if release notes should be created automatically, if set to true, exports will be moved to the directory defined in export presets. So you can see use preset export path, a relative export path, but all of these are optional. So what we have here should work for our project. Now, what we can do is we can go ahead and turn on our releases. So let's pull that in. So we'll say create _release : true, just so that gets taken care of. And then I'm going to also allow it to create releases on GitHub. So what we'll say is env : and then we're going to say GitHub _token : $brace secrets.github _token brace. Now this looks like this probably needs to come back a few more. There we go. Now you could probably pull these guys back. I'm probably way too far indented, so we can do that. And we can do the same thing here. Make sure that's all nice and indented. And that's basically all we need to do here. Now if we click start commit and we go ahead and commit it, and if we go to our actions, you'll see that I have two of these guys running. The reason why is because my create main YAML had my export presets built in. So we're not going to look at that. So what you guys will see is our export game action. It'll say no export preset config.found. Please ensure that you at least defined one via the Godot editor. Now, a lot of times, either A, your export just worked, which is great. That means that your export preset was put into your Godot project, or B, your export preset doesn't exist yet. So we need to actually create one. So if we go back into Godot and we go to project export, you will see that we don't have any presets that are built. Now that's one of the things that we have to make sure that we have for our project to actually work inside of our GitHub actions. So what we can do is we can go to add, and then we go ahead and add Windows Desktop. And one of the things that we have to look at is we have to make sure that we don't have any spaces here, because this is Linux build environment, and the Linux build environment gets a little finicky when you have spaces in your name. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that real quick. And I'm going to leave everything at default, but you guys can go ahead and put whatever you would like here for your project. If you have anything special that you want to do on your Windows release on every build. And also, we said that we were going to build for Linux. Let's go ahead and click Add and click Linux. And then if we have anything that we want to change here as well, we can. Now, you'll notice that we're going to run into a problem. And the reason why we're going to run into a problem is because since we're building this from command line, we need to tell it where to export our project. So you can see our export path here is empty. And this is going to run into a big problem. So what we can do is we can click on our little folder. I'm going to peel up and I'm going to save this as 2D game.exe. We'll go ahead and save that. You can see here you go. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the Linux side. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to click on my little folder. And I'm going to say 2D game.x86_64. And I am going to save that as well. Now that should about do it for us. So now we have to commit this to our project. So if I open up git bash and I make sure that I'm in the correct directory that I need to be in. So in my case, it's documents select Celeste like tutorial. I could say git status. You can see that we have our export preset right here. So what we have to do is we have to say git add --all. And it's going to go ahead and commit all of that data to our project. And then I'm going to go ahead and say git commit -a, enter. And I'm going to go ahead and say added export config. And I'm going to go ahead and hit X, Y, enter. Then we're going to say git push. Now here's the magic. Okay, as soon as I hit git push, we're going to move over to our project here. So I'm going to hit enter. So you'll see that it is now pushing it up to my branch. And then if I come over to my Celeste project and I look at my GitHub actions, you'll see that that push triggered a build. So if I click on this and I click on my build, you'll see that it's running through my export game right now. So it's decompressing a zip file. It's running through this guy's action that he built for us, and it's actually building it for us. So if we wait for a minute, it should take only a few minutes for it to build this out for us. And you will see that it has completed our build. You can see we have this nice, good green check mark. So if we go to our summary, you can actually see we have a green check mark. If we look at our actions, you can actually see when we've succeeded and when we failed. So you can see when I removed my export presets, it blew it up because I didn't have an export preset. And you can see that when we did our export config, it added our export config, it fixed our problem. But now here's where the magic actually happens. If I scroll up and I go to code, you will see over here, I have a release 0.05 right here on the bottom right here. If I click on that, you will see that I have a Linux build and a Windows build of my game. I can click on this and I can actually download my game. And I have my game right here. So I can actually take this and I can extract it to my downloads, and I can actually go ahead and play it. So if I go to my downloads and I double click on it and I run it, there is my game right in my project. And I didn't have to build any of this out for me. So the nice thing about this is that it solves a pretty big problem that some people have with their projects where they need to have builds out for their test team or something like that. And continuous integration is really useful, especially if you're maintaining a project that has to be on 4 or 5 platforms. You don't want to jump onto your Mac or your PC or anything like that, if you can just do it right here, it'll solve a lot of problems for you. So I know what you're wondering. You're wondering, how can I do this with Mac? Well, with Mac, it's actually pretty simple as well. You just go to your project, export, and you set up your Mac OS. You want to make sure that you get rid of your space, like I said earlier, and you want to make sure you set your export path to something out of your Godot project, much like the other two ones. We had // and then our game name .the extension. Now, Mac is a little funky because there is a bug with Godot, or maybe it's just with this export template, but we cannot do a zip. So we have to do a .z instead. .z basically just stands for zip, but that's just something to keep in mind. Now, if we come down here to our identifier, we just put in whatever our identifier is. In my case, it's finepointcgi.game. And then we can go ahead and just save this, right? And go ahead and commit it. So if I save this and I close, and then I come up to my source tree here, which if I resize this for you guys, because it's a little on the large side, and I grab my export preset and I put that in, and you'll see that I was messing around with some Android stuff, and we'll get to that in a second. And I go ahead and I push this, added in Mac support. And you'll see that I have a couple of builds underneath my project. But now that I've pushed it, if we go back to our repo here and we go to our actions, you'll see I have a bunch of actions here running, but you will see that I have this action running here. You'll see that it's about to attempt to export out for Mac as well. So let's verify that we don't have any problems here first, and then we'll step in and see how we can do Android. Now, one of the things that I know a lot of people are going to be asking is, how do we do iOS? The quick answer is it's really, really hard. So I'll probably have to make my own video on that when it's an actual whole separate subject, because it's such a pain to do it with iOS. As per usual with iOS, everything's difficult. So I'm going to let this run and I will be right back. All right. So you can see that we have all green across the board. So if we go to our code and we go ahead and check out our releases, you will see that now we have a Mac OS X.zip. If we click on that, you'll see we'll download it. And you can see we have all of our exported artifacts right here. So it gave our little app, it gave our contents, all of our Mac OS stuff, our package list, everything that we need, and it did it automatically. So if we were to want to support Linux, Mac, and Windows, instead of us needing to export them out individually, we just commit our code to our repo and bam, it runs. And we have a build for all three operating systems, so that way we can test on all three operating systems. Now, how would we go about doing this for Android? Now, Android is a little bit finicky. So what we need to do is we can open up our project here. And what we have to do is we have to go to Add Android. And then we need to set an export path. So let's go ahead and set that. So we'll click on a little set for export path. And we will go ahead and set it to our documents. And we'll call it 2dplatformer.apk. Let's go ahead and hit save. And then we can come down here, and this is where the wrinkle kind of comes in. How can we handle a debug key store or a release key store with a CI system? So when you are building from command line, by default, you can't really do a debug key store because they don't really expect for you to do that. Debug is designed for you to run it directly from your machine and not host it anywhere, right? So this section here is not going to work for you. You will have to put in a release key store for it to work. Now, in my case, I'm going to go ahead and use a release key store, debug key store for my release, but you want to put in your own release key store. And if you want to know how to do that, go ahead and check out my exporting for Android tutorial, and I kind of walk you through that. Now, for this, though, what we need to do is we need to go ahead and make sure that we have a release key store in our project, right? I believe I have it somewhere in here. If I open this up in File Manager, and let me take a look. Here it is right here. So you can see I have a Debug Keystore right here. You might not be able to see it very well, but it's right here. So just make sure that your Keystore is inside of your actual project and that you have committed it to your repo. If it hasn't been committed to your repo, this isn't going to work. But what we can do is we can go to Godot here, Project Export, click on our Release Keystore, and pick our Debug Keystore. So we're going to need to make sure we go into our Celeste tutorial in my case, and I'm going to select my Debug Keystore. And we need to have a release user, which if I remember correctly, it is Android debug key, and the password is Android. So if we just click export project and we click save, let's make sure that it can export it before we start messing around. And you'll notice that by default, it has selected a direct path to our Keystore. So that means that this will not work for our actual CI/CD. You can see it says C users, username, Celeste-like tutorial, debug Keystore. Instead, we need to get rid of all of this and just have debug.keystore because it's located in the root of my project. Okay, so now because it's located here in the root of my project, I guess I can show you right here. Because it's located here in the root of my project, I set it to be just debug Keystore so it can find it. So that's a big caveat that you have to know. But now I can click close and I can go ahead and go to my source tree. I can select my export preset, stage it, and if I have a debug Keystore to add, I can go ahead and add it right here. Now, in my case, I've already added it to my repo, but in your case, you might need to add it. Now, I can just go ahead and push it. So added Android support, and I can go ahead and push that to my main. Now, the nice thing is, as soon as I push it and I go to my actions, you can see that now it's running my build. So we're going to let this run, and it might take a second because it's free, so we have to wait for their hosted runner to pick up our job. But once it runs, I'll be back, and I'll show you guys the results, and we can go from there. So it looks like we have an error. It says debug Keystore not configured in editor setting nor in preset. So we're going to need to actually set our debug Keystore as well, which I'm just going to say is the same Keystore. I wonder if the reason why is because it's attempting to export it out in debug mode. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll copy and paste this. And let's save this and go ahead and re-push this up. That was my fault. And if we scroll all the way up to the top, and it should be building out by now, I imagine. There we go. So we're going to let this run and see what it does. All right, so now you can see we have a nice green check here, which means our build was successful. So if we go to our code and we come over to our release, you will see we have our android.zip. And we can actually open it up. And there is our APK. Awesome. Now, I know you guys would love me to do iOS, but that's actually going to require a lot of work to get that to work. So I'm probably going to do that in a different video. But in the next one in this series, we're going to talk about how to do unit tests and how to automate unit tests. And unit tests are really cool, and I don't really want to get into it, but basically it's testing your code before you merge your code and things like that. So if somebody makes a change to the application and it breaks something, you can catch that before it gets merged into your project. So that's probably what our next video is going to be about. But let me know what you guys think. Do you guys like continuous integration? Do you think that this is useful for you guys for your projects? Let me know in the comments below. I personally think continuous integration is extremely useful, and it's super easy to put together, and really there's no reason not to use it, especially with all the free services out there that does it for us. We might as well take advantage of it. But that is all I have for you guys today. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Hey, If you dislike this video, go ahead and hit that dislike button because I am here to make content for you guys. This video, as with all of my videos, was a viewer suggested video. So if you have any viewer suggestions, please leave them in the comments below and I'll be more than happy to get to them. I am working on a multiplayer series. I just have to figure out NAT hole punching, which is a whole mess and a half for multiplayer because peer-to-peer multiplayer doesn't really want to work very well. So I do have that as a tutorial that I'm working on. If you guys have any comments or questions or anything that you guys want help with, please throw them in the comments below and I'll be more than happy to help you out. Or you can jump on my Discord. Link is in the description. And any of the guys there are more than willing to help you. But that is all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much again for watching. And I will see you all next time. Thanks.